Good evening to you. Mark Sott with HurricaneTrack.com here. Time to talk about a new tropical cyclone that's trying to form. It would be number 9. The National Hurricane Center referring to this as PTC number 9 down here, potential tropical cyclone 9. So it would be the 9th cyclone to form this year, or something like that. I don't know how it works, but it's kind of an area to fill in the gaps between an invest and a named storm or a depression. When it's pretty certain that something's going to form, you want to get some advisories going, and it gives people a little bit of extra time to get ready, especially when we're considering like the Bahamas down here that were just impacted severely by Hurricane Dorian. So let's get rid of my face just for a little bit and take a look at what we have here. As of 5 o'clock, 30-mile-per-hour wind, 1,008 millibars, moving northwest at 8 miles per hour, and still only 70 and 80 in terms of the development chances over the next 2 to 5 days. And if we click on it, here are the key messages. The disturbance is expected to become a tropical storm and bring tropical storm winds to portions of the Bahamas within the next 36 hours. And this is important. This is why they do this. As a result, advisories have been initiated. Note that the forecast uncertainty for these disturbances is generally larger, especially beyond 48 to 72 hours. So this is not a guarantee, but it gives them an opportunity to say, hey, look, we think this is going to go on to develop into a tropical storm in this case, and here are our forecast points with that, all right? The system is expected to bring tropical storm force winds and heavy rainfall to portions of the northwest Bahamas on Friday and Saturday. And then this is important. Significant storm surge is not expected in the northwest Bahamas from this system. So that's good news there, especially considering what happened with Dorian. Let's hope that this remains the case in terms of no significant storm surge. But hope by itself is not always a good planning tool. You cannot hope systems away. People think they can. I don't think you can. You can have hope as a tool, but it's not the only tool in your toolbox. You also have to use common sense, and you have to take action. So we'll see how this works out. We'll take a look at the track map, etc. in just a second. The system could bring tropical storm force winds and rainfall to portions of the Florida East Coast over the weekend. So these are the three main points to keep in mind. All right, so now let's look at the map here, and let's look at the 3-day map first, okay? So they, National Hurricane Center, bringing it across the Bahamas here and into Florida with a landfall. Now, we're going to look at a little bit of model guidance, but this hasn't formed yet. It's still rather ugly looking in terms of its organization. It has a ways to go. So once we have a vortex or a cyclone at the surface, then the models will hopefully do a better job. And maybe the models are doing a good job. It's just which one? We don't know the answer to that yet. So as it stands, a direct threat for the Florida Peninsula. All right, by the weekend. Okay, so northwest Bahamas first, and then the Florida Peninsula thereafter. Now we go look at the full forecast. They bring it up and then back offshore. We'll see about this. I believe that we'll see this shift more offshore of Florida, and it'll be stronger over time. That's just what I'm seeing in the guidance, and it makes sense. We are in the peak of the hurricane season. Water temperatures are still very warm in this vicinity, and the upper level environment is forecast to become more favorable. We are heading into a very favorable period. It's still a little ways away, but that is gradually moving into the Atlantic Basin. I tweeted that today, did a retweet, I think it was a retweet, from Ben Knoll, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow in tomorrow's update. But these are all happening, this system, and then we are watching a system out in the Atlantic before the arrival of what is looking like a very favorable setup with the air very easy to rise, what we call rising motion and divergence in the atmosphere. And this is going into that. Florence last year, a year ago, moved into, it was out there for so long, to an area where the pattern changed on it. So as Florence approached, it began to weaken. this may be coming into a pattern that is conducive for development. So I expect that we're going to see this stronger as we go forward. So this was the relative vorticity from 9 UTC today, early this morning, okay? And this is the area we were looking at. Remember, I promised we were going to go look at this again. Let's use the color white. That'll be better. So this is the area right here. The bundling, how does it look through this methodology? It's an analysis product. What does it look like? Kind of like an X-ray, but it's not an X-ray. You know, so this is what it looked like earlier this morning, and this is what it looked like not too long ago. All right, around 18 UTC, so several hours later, and it's trying to focus right there in the south central Bahamas, not over here. You know, it seems to be concentrating more right in there, and that is what the European was zeroing in on. So let's see if this progresses. I'll tweet this later tonight when we get the 0 UTC data plot from this analysis product from the University of Wisconsin. I'll tweet this. I'll also put it on Patreon, our HurricaneTrack branding on Patreon as well. So we'll be able to keep up with this. I want to know, and let me zoom in on it, does this continue to try to focus right in here and instead of down here or over here or whatever? And the more it focuses right in here, the better chance this has to be stronger as it comes northwest through the Bahamas and towards the Florida East Coast. You folks down here in the greater Miami area, Fort Lauderdale, I don't have much concern at all for you folks, which is good. And in fact, the cone of uncertainty, the 3-day cone, is just right there close to Miami and Fort Lauderdale, etc. But I'm not too worried about it, okay? And you'd be on the southern part. You could still get some rain bands, some gusty winds, but I do not see a hurricane threat for extreme South Florida from this system, and not much of an impact at all. Along the East Coast, Vero Beach, north, probably so. Some kind of impact. High waves. Yeah, we went through this with Dorian. By the way, when this gets named, assuming it does, the name will be Umberto. So that's a look at the vorticity signature. Here's the satellite of the entire North Atlantic, the deep tropics, and so forth. Lots of westerly wind and energy up here, way in the mid-latitudes. But down here, festering in the Bahamas, is PTC number 9. That's one way to look at it. There's this upper level low over here. Environment should be getting more ripe in this area. We do have to watch all this energy that's transgressing something. It's moving across the Atlantic. We can worry about that later. I do have my eyes on it because we do have a potential threat for some kind of weather from these tropical waves. That's a lot of energy. And, you know, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. We certainly have to watch this. But all this energy and more of it gathering over Africa will move into the Atlantic basin as the pattern flips to one that is much more conducive. The most conducive that we have seen it the entire season, according to the data that we've been looking at, and I'll address that more tomorrow. So looking at the model guidance here, it's a split. The European, the ECMWF here, this is the 12Z run today, versus the GFS, the Global Forecast System, and other models. The Canadian, the UK Met, this new one, I think it's a German model called the Icon. I mean, there's enough global models that we could sit here and look at this for 2 hours, but we're not going to do that. I want to try to keep things focused on the two major, fairly reliable models, the ECMWF, the Euro for short, and the GFS. So what are we looking at? This is the 12Z run, so it's valid. This morning is when it was initialized. This is the analysis. There's the concentration of energy in the central Bahamas. There's North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, so forth and so on to get your bearings, okay? So this is the morning analysis. This is valid Friday morning. Look what it does. It takes that piece of energy and really concentrates it to the east of, I think that's Eleuthera, if my geography is intact. I hope it is. I know that's the Abaco, Abaco Island and several islands down there. I believe that's Eleuthera. Maybe it's farther down the chain, but nevertheless, this is what I'm looking for. Does it start to concentrate in one area, that sharp area? And you can see the wind barbs in here, this sharp trough area of the tropical wave, this energy, surface trough, and it tries to close off a low right there, roughly. That's what I'm seeing from this analysis here, the model showing that. It's taking this energy right here, and this is the analysis. This is what's really happening, and this is what the model is forecasting, the Euro, 24 hours out. So Friday morning. Then Saturday morning, you go, oh, wow, look at that. Right over the Bahamas there, the northwest Bahamas, and that's close enough to the east coast of Florida, southeast Florida. Tropical storm watches probably going to go up at some point, and here we go. And I may have to get my rear end down to Florida in a hurry. We'll talk about that at the end here. That's 48 hours, and then at 72 hours, pretty close, right? Not too far off the Space Coast. I was just down here. Mark Hilburn, I'll be texting you, buddy. I may need the unit there at New Smyrna Beach, please, sir. I'll text you later. He's one of our supporters, and boy, am I grateful for stuff like that. What a world we live in. And I may need it. I may need to go down and stay at his place at New Smyrna Beach, and here's the reason why. The European model here really concentrating that energy, very warm water. Dorian did not do much at all to disrupt that, except in this vicinity right through here. That's about it. It also brought some cooler water down this way as it departed, and those northerly winds brought colder water along the east coast and mid-Atlantic, but we'll worry about that later. That's 72 hours. Here's 96. Now, this is where it becomes like, okay, what's going to happen? The steering currents seem to collapse, and the Euro kind of leaves this out here just meandering, as you're going to see. That's day 4. There's day 5. Just a nightmare in terms of really chopping up the water. This will definitely cool the waters at this point. So we could have major surf problems on these south-facing beaches especially, and the east-facing beaches of Georgia and Florida. Surfers will love it. Regular novice beachgoers, be very careful. Everybody be careful. This could be really bad for beach erosion with this large hurricane in the model lurking just offshore. All right, so that's the European out to 5 days. 120 hours. I want you to pay attention to this. Extremely important what I do now. 120 hours out from the ECMWF. Now look what happens when I switch it to the GFS at the same time frame. Ready to pull your hair out? I'm ready. All right. What do? It's the same run, period, the 12Z run of the American version of this global model, the GFS, the Global Forecast System. Where is it? It's over here, I think. What a disaster in terms of not having cohesion and a consensus in the model guidance. We back it up. There's the Euro. There's the GFS. What are we supposed to do with that? Well, you go back and look at the Hurricane Center. That's what they do with that. This is a very tricky forecast, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't know how it's going to pan out. Now, one of our patrons down here in Miami, Anita, asked me if I had to bet my life on it, if my life depended on it, which model would I go with? Generally speaking, the European model does better overall, but it's more complicated than that. It does better with certain things, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do better with this system. If the global forecast system, the GFS, is right, then we have this mess that goes across and ends up big rainmaker, the energy spread out over a large area, versus this obvious hurricane in the model where the Euro is running rampant with it, and it does other things after day 5. As I mentioned before, you're more than welcome to go look at that, but things can change tremendously. I will go and show you real quick. Let me pull up this in Tropical Tidbits. The, not Recon, sorry. The Euro here, let's look at the CONUS shot as it's called, and we'll look at the upper dynamics, the 500 millibar height anomaly. There we go. So if we go to day 5, and then we'll single this out, 120 hours out, we looked at this earlier today, big time ridging, troughing leaving over here. So basically the blue would attract a hurricane towards it, but this is leaving the trough. We have ridging building over the top, and this is 5 days out. If this is sooner, if the Atlantic ridging is stronger, if, then this could be much closer to the coast of the Carolinas. If stuff's weaker, later, whatever, scenario, this could be farther offshore, and then out it goes. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is a big red flag to me. Seeing these anomalies, and these are meters in the atmosphere of thickness, okay? It's all in meteorology. For the layperson, for you and me, we need to see, does this build out ahead and trap this and bring it up the coast like that? Does it just sit around down here and then this moves by and more energy comes in and sweeps this out? I mean, we could draw on this all day. It starts to look like something John Madden would do, right, in football. And, one of our great supporters works on the Madden team down at EA Sports. It's amazing how all this is connected, but I'm not kidding here. This is how it works. We have sports where there's a lot of scenarios, yes, and these are things we can relate to. That's why I bring up these different analogies. In weather, there are different players on the field, so to speak. And in this case, it matters a lot because we could have billions of dollars of damage and lives at stake. Not just, players on the field with X's and O's. It's a lot bigger than that. So we need to watch this closely, and you folks, in the Carolinas, in Florida, and in the Bahamas, you got to pay attention. Now, this is another way to look at it. These are the model runs from 18Z today. You look at the consensus models. That's these two here. Where are those? Those are pretty much on the Hurricane Center's track. The rest of these over here, the AEMI, which is the GFS ensemble mean, that's a different scenario. Far different than what the Euro is showing, which is something like that. I think we can all agree on that. So this is one way to look at the models. These are the consensus, generally speaking, right through here. There's another one in there. All right, so that's what the Hurricane Center is typically going to go with. Something similar to the consensus models, where you weigh the different models and you get this average. It's an impressive way that they do this. And we are going to delve into that next year in a really neat master class type of thing that I'm going to produce on Patreon. We'll talk about that later, but it's coming because this gets really confusing for people, and I want to try to make it easy to understand. So let's watch these consensus models here going forward, okay? Instead of these individual ones. Well, what about that one? The consensus aids, those right there, the orange and the yellow, those are the ones to really pay attention to. This is the GFS ensemble package from 12Z today. Wow, looks like somebody went crazy with the silly string, doesn't it? You can see a lot of, wow. So that's no wonder that the AEMI, the GFS ensemble mean, the average of all of these is generally across Florida and into this area. That's what I was showing you earlier. And then some of them come in and do some of this wackiness, indicating that the steering pattern is going to be complex. So there you go. I wish I had more for you to help, but I don't, because here we are, like deja vu. Real quick, it is coming up on the anniversary of Florence making landfall in North Carolina. On Amazon Prime Video, go there, search Tracking the Hurricanes 2018. I've had several emails today, people asking about that, and I didn't pull up the graphic. I should have. It's easy to find. Amazon Prime Video, we all know what that is. Tracking the Hurricanes 2018. I'll put a link to it in today's description. Thanks to those of you that were asking about that. I got some dust on the keyboard there. All right. I probably have to get ready to go to Florida sometime tomorrow, so stay tuned to that for that. In the meantime, I literally am getting ready to get in a rental truck and drive to the Outer Banks to pick up that one last camera box that's out there, and then come back tomorrow. I'll take the laptop with me. I'll do another update in the morning. I'll be tweeting stuff along the way. I'll be posting stuff on Patreon. Patreon is where we are doing our crowdfunding if you want to support the project, and I'm posting information there. It's like our own little micro universe of social media, support for the project, all wrapped up into one. And no, you do not have to be a supporter. You don't have to open your wallet to gain access to most of the posts that I do there. It's really neat. It's kind of like WordPress, Twitter, Facebook, wrapped up into one, where I can also provide exclusive content to those who are supporting the project financially. And they have done a great job of that. Much of what we're doing is because of that patronage, and thank you very much. So there you go. I'm going to be leaving in just a little while, heading up to the Outer Banks to Rodanthe, where I will spend the night. Go down to Frisco, grab the box that was out there for Dorian, come back tomorrow, load up some more equipment, and probably head to Florida. You never know. That could change. We shall see. The adventure continues. Have a great evening. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. As always, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that you tune in and listen and watch and digest what I have to tell you. I appreciate it. It means the world to me. I'll have more for you starting tomorrow morning.